I've identified 6 skills. And the way that you should do this really is like have a roster or a list of like 5 athletes that you're going to think about, or 3 athletes you're going to think about. Write the athlete's name down. You're going to end up picking 4 of these 6 skills that best define where your athlete is with training. So it's kind of like, like you have the Myers-Briggs personality test, you have the Enneagram personality test. This is like a how you train and how you race personality test for swimmers. All right, so they're great racers, they're great with hidden training, they're great with technical stuff, they're great with short pace, long pace, or aerobic. So these are the 6 things. I've got them grouped here and defined for you. I'm not going to go through all the different things, but you're basically, you have 4 of those 6 skills that really stand out. You can read through each skill's got 3 different ways that you can kind of use to define, think about your athletes. So some of the givens as we're going through this, we're not going to measure practice attendance. It's sort of given that these athletes that we're talking about are, in the top 10% of your group. And then the strength and conditioning aspect, the given, for my squad is that they do 2 hour-long or so, whatever sessions, each week, that we do before practice in the water. So those are the givens. So you're going to pick your 6 skills, and it's because of the way that I'm doing this, the way that this is going to end up shaking out at the end of it, you've got to write down the skills in a certain way. So the next few slides really just show you how to write down the skills. So, you've got your letters that are R for racing, H for hidden training, T for technical, S for short pace, L for long pace, A for aerobic. You're going to write down the athletes' 4 of 6 skills, and you're going to write them down in a certain order. So the R, the H, and the T are in a certain order. If you're missing one of those letters, like if hidden training is not part of your athlete's top 4 of the, of their skills, then you write the R and then you write the T and you just don't have the H in there. And that's your first row, given that they're good at racing and being technical. So you're going to have two rows, no matter how it shakes out. You might have 2 letters on the first row, 2 on the second. You might have 3 on the top row, 1 on the bottom. You can kind of, your athletes are going to look a lot different. So looks like this. Some of my athletes look like this. I'm going to show you some athletes that are a little bit more well-known, and we'll talk about them a little bit. Now here's the athletes that I've got in my squad, like that and that. Just kind of some examples. So going through a few pages forward, we're going to look at like just some examples. So like I've got to actually know these athletes a little bit to really make a judgment call on these. This is just my opinion. But I think Michael Phelps, if you were to write down his 4 of 6 best, of course, it's really tough for Michael. I would say it's racing ability, hidden training ability. I mean, a lot, is said of Michael's like, stuff that he did after the Olympics in 2008, where he wasn't really training and everything. But for the bulk of Michael Phelps' career, he's a high level athlete in terms of hidden training. I mean, how could you not be doing everything that he's done? And I've watched him. When I did watch him for a year, his hidden training was on point, never missed a practice, not even a lap of any of the workouts. All right, so he takes care of that. And he's also very technical. Look at the guy swim, and he's improved that so much, takes it real serious. I'd say the aerobic part, because of the fact that he's training for an 8-day Olympic run, is probably his key thing that he's good at. So he's an RHTA. Caleb Dressel, I think he's got the RHT as well. And I think he's probably an S. Katie Hoff definitely was an RHT, had a full top row. And you'll see later as I go through kind of how to look at this a little bit deeper, what a full top row really means if you have an athlete that has a full top row. She was a full top row, probably was best at long pace. Elizabeth Beisel, I mean, I really am hesitant to even put this one out there because I think to go 4:31, the long course IM, technically you've got to be world class. But I do think that aerobically she was so great, long pace. I think it was a big part of her training from what I've seen. So I gave those more credence than the technical part. Other athletes that I've worked with on the higher levels are here. I mean, so many with the top full row. A lot of the less physical stuff and more cerebral stuff is on the top row. Having all of those things buttoned up seems to be really important for high level athletes. Okay, so some more well-known athletes. Again, full top rows with all three of these athletes. All right, so let's talk about it. Some classic types, the first full row. So if you've got a first full row, that means, like, if you write it down for your athlete, you see that for your athlete. The mental game for that athlete is the reason these athletes are approaching their potential. In some cases, the mental game is better than the physical game, but the physical game could be excellent as well. So that's the Michael Phelps rule, right? He's the best example of that. Examples of the first full row types. So you've got a couple different types. And this is where it starts to get kind of interesting in terms of how you write down the letters in the two rows. And it'll get more interesting, I think, as we go through the next few minutes. So an example of some first full first row types. You've got the first full row, and then you've got an S. Now, these athletes in general need to work towards better endurance, general endurance or specific racing endurance. Athletes with that RHT and then an L, they should work towards a better front end speed. You know, you've got the L there that shows you that if they got the top row full and then they've only got an L, it's better for them in terms of training than the S. Like, you know, one of my best athletes on my squad has got this one. And the thing that's holding him back the most is his front end speed. He doesn't have the ability to really, like, you know, to go as a high school boy, 20 flat, you know, in the 50 free. And if he did, he'd probably be under 420 in the 500 freestyle. As it is, he's not going to have the necessary speed to go quite that fast. Okay, so if you've got an RHT full row on the top and then an A, then the athlete has, you know, is probably more of a distance swimmer and has to work towards better pacing. They've got to work on better overall speed. Some other classic types, a full second row. So what does it mean if you've only got, like, if you've got 3 on the bottom row, but you've only got 1 on the top? What does that mean? So that means that the mental game is the reason these athletes are not at their potential. They're probably, and I know I'm looking at this one in a little bit more of a negative light, but I guess it's the way it is. You know, these athletes are one of these 3. Okay, so if you've got a full second row, you might have an R on the top. That's the racer that can improve aspects having to do with discipline. So they can race, they can train, but they don't come to practice all the time because they're sick, because their hidden training isn't very good, and they don't do anything in or out of the turns. They don't streamline very well, so their technique isn't very good. The second type, if your second row is full, is a full second row with an H. So that tends to be the typical type A kid who is really into swimming, goes to bed on time, does some of the stuff outside of the pool, kind of is the swimming nerd, and then does all the training pretty well. But they're kind of like the bonehead kid that doesn't do the really simple technique stuff well. You know, they'll go to bed early, but they won't streamline off the wall. And then they get maybe a little bit nervous for the racing, or they don't believe themselves. They just aren't the best racers compared to their peers. Then you've got the full bottom row with the T. So that's the athlete who practices better than they perform, or they're kind of just inconsistent with performances. They could have some high level performances, but they're just like, don't do it all the time. So this athlete's got the physical tools, but they've just got to round out the mental approach. If you can get the racing in with the, you know, get them to race well, at least at times during the season, this athlete can put together some pretty good performances. Oftentimes, if you've got somebody that's really good, that's done something like once or twice pretty good, you know, every year, they're one of these athletes where they've got a T and then the bottom row is full. All right, so again, the way that you group the letters and the way that you group the rows makes this thing make sense. And again, it's just for fun, but as you're going through the thought process about your athletes, I think you can really think about, oh, that's what they're missing. Okay, this is what they're all about. So more classic types are people who, okay, so the RHLA, this is your typical old school distance swimmer grinder. They're fun to work with, but it's like sometimes they drive you crazy because their technique might not be as good. Or maybe they just like, when you do the 50s or the 100s pace in practice, you're like, you can't get them to go any faster than what they would do on a shorter rest set. Okay, the second classic type would be the big time practice performer that doesn't race well. So, they're technically good. They take care of stuff outside of the pool. They can sort of, they can do a lot of the training stuff, but they don't really like they're not on the relay. They don't have enough speed and they aren't good enough at racing to like make your top 4 men or women on the relay. Okay, and then the third one, you've got a full bottom row, and then you've got the technicality. We've already talked about this one. All right, so that's the end of the slides. You can go through some of this stuff on your own and check out, some of the examples, like the examples of the great athletes. It's just amazing how many of the great athletes have a full top row. The hidden training is there, the technique is there, and the racing ability is clearly there. I think if you've got somebody with a full top row, they've probably got the most potential because, the technical part of it really has to do with the coach and the athlete. The hidden training part of it ultimately comes down to the athlete. The coach can help, and the racing part of it, the coach can certainly help all these things. The coach can create the type of training environment where the athlete can become, and racing environment where the athlete can become a better racer, learn how to become better with hidden training and all these things. But that top row is, it seems like it's a little bit more internal, comes with the athlete a little bit more. Again, I think it can be taught for sure, but it's the sort of thing to look for and to take advantage of within your athlete's skill set. I think with one of my top athletes, when I wasn't noticing his technical focus, when I wasn't noticing how driven he became during the workouts when they were technically focused, then I wouldn't have changed what I changed a few weeks back in terms of the type of focus that we're taking with the training. And I think my experience with the athlete would be a little bit more like we'd be butting heads. And I think if I can help you in that way, more than anything with this particular way of looking at your athletes, if I can help you sort of get along with your athletes because you're seeing them for who they are a little bit better, then I think my job has been done. So hopefully you can take this and get a lot out of it. Have a great day, everybody.